I'm going to open with our land acknowledgement. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin, throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed, from time immemorial. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Lummi Nation and Nooksack tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. My name's Terry Bryant. I'm the director of the Homeless Service Center at Opportunity Council, and I'm the chair for this group. We have some good attendance today. I really appreciate that. It would be great if you could all introduce yourselves in the chat log. And when you do that, could you please add your email? And that way we can make sure you get added to our mailing list and you get emails, notifications of meetings, advocacy opportunities, and that kind of thing. I have one quick announcement before we start with our guest speaker today. Every year we observe Homeless Memorial Day on the solstice. This year it's on December 21st. It's going to be virtual and at 5:30. This is going to be our 6th year of observing this day in remembrance of the folks who have lost their lives, either as a result of their homelessness or related to their trauma while homeless. It's going to be at 5:30, and we'll be sure and put your email in that chat log so that you can get the invitation to the event when we get that sent out. With that, I'd like to introduce John Stovall to come speak with us about legislative priorities for this session from the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance. Thanks for being here, John.
Thanks, Terry. I have some slides. Would it be possible to make me a co-host so I could share my screen?
Give it a shot now.
Let's see. Great. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
There we go. So, hey everybody, I'm John Stovall. I am the member organizer at the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance. Several of you I know already because I've been to these meetings before and we've crossed paths in other ways. So great to see all of you. And for those of you who I don't know, it's great to meet you. Yeah, so I'm here to kind of share a little bit of information about what the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance is preparing for with this upcoming legislative session. It is going to be a unique session, to say the least. There will be a lot of things that are going to be different, including the fact that it's going to be an all virtual legislative session, something that has never been done before in the history of the state legislature. And we also have a lot of really unique budget constraints this year as well, due to, of course, the coronavirus and the economic impacts that it has had on our state. But before I get into what the kind of key priorities are that the Housing Alliance has been working on, I'm going to just take a step back and kind of give a little bit of context. So every single year, the Housing Alliance, after the previous legislative session is over, which is usually in March or April, we take a bit of a break, we take a breather, and then like at the beginning of the summer, for several months, we do what we call our listening sessions or our listening tour. And we connect with communities all over the state and listen to what people in the community say are the top most urgent priorities and needs related to housing and homelessness in their community and throughout the whole state. So this year it's again been different. We did it all virtually this year. So normally we would drive up to Bellingham or drive up to or drive over to Spokane, or we'd drive down to Tacoma or to Vancouver, and we try to hit all of as many communities as possible. But this year, while we weren't able to go to each of these communities in person, we conducted a lot of listening sessions virtually, and it actually opened up more opportunities that we really have had in previous years to connect with different groups and different folks. So I would say this is probably one of the most representative legislative agendas that we've put together, at least since I've been here, because of the fact that we have been able to talk to many, many more people than we normally would be able to. And so all of the input that we gather from these listening sessions is also coupled with a widespread survey that we send out to folks who aren't able to attend those meetings. And all of that is put into a proposal to our public policy committee, which then approves our legislative agenda, and then our board approves it. And then we go back to the communities and ask, like, is based on these priorities that we have put together, based on what you said, do these things line up with what you were originally telling us? And we get that approval, and here we are now with an actual proposal. That being said, our board still has to approve this one more time. So what I'm sharing is technically a draft, but it's pretty likely that this is going to be what we use going forward. So, and I will also just say, many of your voices were included in this because we came and joined a Whatcom Homeless Coalition as part of our listening tour this year. So thank you all for participating and for informing us. So with that, I'm going to go through, so I guess I should give a little bit more context too. So because our legislature is going to be quite constrained this year, the virtual environment is basically making it more difficult to process and to move many, many bills. So the leaders of the legislature in both parties are basically telling advocacy organizations and telling folks, like, you know, limit the number of bills that you're bringing to the legislature this year, because we're just not going to have the capacity to be able to do everything. So, you know, we took that information and we have 4 really big bills, I would say, 4 like really ambitious, important priorities. And we have like an additional 6 that, you know, the first 4 are kind of like we must have these things. These are absolutely urgent. We won't go home without them kind of thing. And then the other ones are like, we also think they're incredibly urgent and we're going to fight just as hard pretty much to get those, but they're not on our like tippy top list. So I'll go through each one of these and take any questions if there's time at the end. So the first thing is, you know, year in and year out, the Housing Alliance pushes for more funding in the Housing Trust Fund, which is our state's primary way that we build affordable housing, particularly affordable housing for those at the lowest income levels. So often this is housing that's built for people making 30% of the area median income or below. Often it's used to build permanent supportive housing and housing for folks who are coming out of homelessness. And so it's really like a key piece of our housing policy statewide. And we don't have a permanent funding source for the Housing Trust Fund. So every year, or every biennium, but pretty much every year, we have to start from scratch and say, we need the legislature to appropriate $200 million of funding through the capital budget into the Housing Trust Fund so that we can continue to build more and more affordable housing. So we have a really severe shortage of affordable housing, especially for people who are very low and extremely low income. So we have to really be building as much as possible, as you all know. So last year, we were able to secure over $200 million in the Housing Trust Fund, which is pretty unusual because last year was the second year of the biennium. So it was kind of like a supplemental year, and not usually a year that you would make a big request for funding, but there were some different circumstances that allowed it to be possible last year for us to get that much money. And that was actually a high watermark for us. This past legislative session was the biggest success we've had in terms of dollar amounts for the Housing Trust Fund yet. And so it's great, and it shows that there is appetite in the legislature to build more deeply affordable housing. And we're still at the point where we need so much more. So we're coming back again this year with a big ask of $240 million for the Housing Trust Fund to be used to build new construction of affordable homes, which would build about, I can't remember if it's 5,000 or 6,000, but it would build, let's just say 6,000 affordable homes throughout Washington state, which is really significant. And in addition to that $240 million, we're requesting an additional $10 million to go through the capital budget as well to preserve affordable housing, especially in rural communities where buildings use restrictions or buildings like affordability requirements are expiring, and those buildings are at risk of going to market rate. And of course, what that means for the people living in those buildings is that their rents will go from being deeply subsidized. Often these are folks on fixed incomes like SSI, who are paying a like somewhat affordable amount. Even like $300 compared to your overall income on SSI is still a lot of money, but at least that is affordable to them. We're talking about those folks having their rents increase to whatever the market rate is in that area. And so leading to displacement of entire buildings of folks. So this $10 million would be used to allow nonprofit housing providers or housing authorities to purchase those buildings and keep them affordable long-term. And this last legislative session, we actually were able to appropriate a similar amount, $10 million for this exact purpose, to preserve USDA rural development buildings. And all of that money has been used to date to save multiple buildings throughout our state. So that's why we're coming back with another ask, because we know the need is there. So yes, we're going to increase, we're going to preserve affordable housing throughout our state. Secondly, we are going to keep people in their homes and prevent an increase in homelessness. This is the theme of 2020 for those of us working in housing and homelessness, along with non-congregate shelter. There's kind of like some like themes this year, right? But one is eviction prevention and keeping people in their homes. So over 185,000 people in Washington right now are behind on rent. And if we didn't have an eviction moratorium, all of those people would be vulnerable to an eviction for non-payment of rent or for having a rental arrears. So we're really grateful that Governor Inslee has implemented the eviction moratorium in the early parts of the year and has extended it several times. And it's now set to expire on December 31st. But on December 31st, that's still not a good time for an eviction moratorium to be lifted with so many people behind on rent. In fact, that's maybe arguably the worst time of the year for somebody to be evicted. So in the meantime, we're currently pushing for the governor to extend the eviction moratorium through March 31st of 2021, so that our state legislature can actually enact long-term solutions for our rental crisis right now. And those should include just cause protections, meaning, and this is something that the Housing Alliance has worked on for several years already, and was an issue since before the pandemic started. But just cause essentially means a landlord cannot simply kick you out of your home for no reason and just give you a 20-day notice. That's, it doesn't seem like that should be legal, but it is in our landlord-tenant law. If you're a month-to-month renter, or if your lease is about to expire and you've done absolutely nothing to break the lease and you're already caught up on rent, let's say you're the perfect tenant in the world, your landlord can still just say, here's a 20-day notice, get out, and I'm not giving you any reason. And one of the problems with that is that it masks discrimination often. It masks discrimination and it masks retaliation in many different ways. It can come up in a person requesting a disability accommodation. It can come up with racial discrimination, where a landlord says, here's a 20-day notice, I want you out. And they don't have to say why, but there's a reason why, and it's a nefarious reason or a biased reason. And what that does is it creates a huge loophole in our fair housing laws. Like, we have fair housing laws to protect against those kind of things, but no cause evictions or a lack of just cause leads to the undermining of those fair housing laws. So just cause is incredibly important as part of our eviction prevention work. Also, we need to extend aspects of the eviction moratorium through the end of the pandemic, essentially. And I just want to say, we know that the eviction moratorium is not on its own a complete policy around this whole issue. Like, it keeps people in their homes, but it doesn't actually deal with the rental arrears that people are accumulating, but we'll get to that part in a second. So we need to extend protections outlined in the eviction moratorium, also incorporate statutory payment plans so that folks can start to get caught up on rent. And we're also looking at the idea of making it not an option, or not, yeah, making it, I guess, banning the use of prior debt to a previous landlord as a reason to automatically deny someone tenancy. And maybe it would be like just specifically during COVID-19 or something like that, COVID-related debt, because we know, I mean, this is already a huge barrier for a lot of tenants. If you've been evicted in the past and you still owe money to that landlord, you haven't been able to pay it off, haven't been able to get assistance to pay it off, that's going to follow you. And most landlords at this point will say, no, I won't rent to you if you have money owed to a landlord. And so given the number of people, like I mentioned, 185,000 people who are behind rent right now, if any of those folks are trying to move to a new home, they're going to face that challenge. So we're looking at finding ways to remove that as a barrier for folks who need to move. And then finally, there's another piece that is kind of potentially going to be incorporated into this kind of amalgamation of policies to keep people in their homes, and that is looking at mediation as a required step before a landlord can continue to the legal eviction process. So having a required mediation ahead of time, which can be an option, it can be an opportunity for the dispute resolution center, the mediation organization, to connect the landlord to rental assistance and work out payment plans and things like that. So as you can probably tell, this is not like a single simple policy or piece of legislation. This is going to be a combination of several things that will work in tandem with one another to keep people in their homes. And so related to this, as I mentioned, these eviction protections don't actually solve the problem of rental arrears or people falling behind on rent. So what we need is a significant infusion of funding to be able to pay off people's debts and to be able to pay for rental assistance. Governor Inslee, or our state, allocated $100 million this year to the ERAP program, the Eviction Rental Assistance Program. Probably some or many of you like help administer that or are referring people to that resource. And it's been great. It's been working really well. And $100 million is sadly not kind of anywhere near close to the actual need. The Department of Commerce is estimating that we need about $1 billion to be able to meet the actual need. And so like $1 billion is just, it's like play money. It's like very hard to think about, I think. But we have a concrete proposal to be able to come up with $200 to $300 million in the short term. And we will continue to push at the federal level for a next relief package, which is looking more likely at this point. And so anyway, the proposal is to increase the state's document recording fee, which, as many of you know, that's the primary funding source for the Consolidated Homelessness Grant. So a lot of the funds that are used for shelters and outreach and homelessness prevention comes from our state document recording fee, which is currently at $85.50 or so. That's about what the fee is at this point. And we would increase it to $100, or increase it by $100 to $185. So more than doubling the fee, but yet as the document recording fee is levied on the sale of a home and things like that, $185 is a pretty reasonable fee, and not like prohibitive in terms of like someone being able to buy a house, for example. So we think it's going to be a big lift, but it is also very important and we think realistic. And we have two really, really amazing prime sponsors on this in Representative Ormsby and Senator Robinson as well. So we're excited by this opportunity to raise between $200 and $300 million for rental assistance through the increase in the document recording fee. So like I said, we'll have to we'll have to continue to push at the federal level and explore other options to ensure that we still don't have people in our state who are accumulating rental arrears and not able to access rental assistance. It's just really, really important. And finally, our last like really big lead agenda item is related to the budget once again, but it's also related to revenue. So I think many of us know, Washington is the worst in terms of our tax code. We are 50th out of 50 states in terms of being the most regressive tax code in the country, meaning the people who make the most money pay the least in taxes, and the people who make the least money pay the most in taxes. And it's deeply inequitable. In fact, the Washington State Budget and Policy Center has basically put out a report saying that our tax code is a driver of racial inequality in Washington. And so for that reason alone, I think it's just really important to work on flipping our tax code so that we have a progressive tax code, meaning we don't rely on sales tax and property tax, but we rely instead on revenue that is levied on folks who have the ability and the means to pay it, like a capital gains tax or like a payroll tax or like an estate tax, for example. These are all options that are being considered this year. The other really important piece of our revenue is that the amount of revenue that we collect is deeply tied to the amount of money we can spend on programs that we all are administering and programs that folks that we work with every single day are relying on. And so during an economic recession like the one we're in, sadly, the programs that get cut first are human services and homelessness services and other programs that are often funded out of the general fund that are not constitutionally required to be funded. So those are sort of discretionary budget items. And in the Great Recession, our last big recession, our legislature made the choice to cut funding to those programs to balance the budget. We cannot do that again this time. We still haven't even recovered from the damage that was done from the last recession due to those decisions. So what we need to do this time is pass new progressive revenue, like a capital gains tax or one of the other options that are being considered currently, to increase our budget and to be able to fully fund all of the things that people need in order to have a just recovery moving forward. So those are our top items. I'm going to go just very quickly, because I don't want to take up too much time, but I will go very quickly through some of the additional items here. So last year there was a bill introduced called the Housing Justice Act, and we're interested in introducing it again this year. And it would essentially ban discrimination against renters based on their prior criminal record. So I talked about the barrier for tenants to be able to get into a home due to having past debt owed to a landlord. One of the other really, really big ones is having prior involvement with the criminal legal system. And in Seattle, they passed the Fair Chance Housing Ordinance, which actually it does what this bill would do at the state level, but at the local level. So in Seattle, it's illegal to use someone's criminal history against them in an application. But the rest of the state, including Whatcom County, doesn't have that protection for folks. So that is another huge priority for us this year, is getting that bill passed. We're also interested in preventing foreclosures by extending the Foreclosure Fairness Act, which would essentially extending the Foreclosure Fairness Act to small landlords, so that small landlords who are, heavily reliant on the rent, who are not being able to get the rent in the short term, are not at risk of foreclosure in the short term. And this is an extension of an act that was that came out of the Great Recession as well. We also have a sort of placeholder spot on our lead agenda for a proposal from another organization that is that has a proposal or a legislative priority that is rooted in equity and racial justice, that we can support, sort of as a solidarity item on our list here. So if any of you know of a particular legislative priority that you're really stoked about, that it's really rooted in equity and racial justice, connect with me, and then we can work on submitting it for consideration. It doesn't have to be focused specifically on housing and homelessness. And two other things. So the multifamily tax exemption program is basically what it sounds like. It's a tax exemption for developers to build multifamily housing. There have been conversations among lawmakers to extend this program. And the Housing Alliance has been opposing those because the MFTE program really doesn't build housing affordable to people who are low income, essentially. The income levels that the MFTE program serves are often out of reach of people who need affordable housing most. There are also no tenant protections built into the program compared to almost every single other affordable housing policy or like financing tool that we have, like the low-income housing tax credit, and most HUD programs have just cause protections built into them, but the MFTE program does not. And similarly, often the MFTE program can be used in ways that further gentrification and displacement, unfortunately, because it is a tax break to private developers to build housing that is not affordable to people who live in the area. So anyway, we are deeply committed to including anti-displacement protections in any MFTE program or bill that gets introduced this year. And finally, many of you are probably familiar with our foundational community supports program through the Healthcare Authority, which is a Medicaid waiver that allows our state to use Medicaid dollars to pay for supportive services for folks who are living in permanent supportive housing, which is a huge piece of the permanent supportive housing puzzle, right? Like those supportive services allow folks to meet their needs, whether it's behavioral health or otherwise, to be able to feel stable and have their other needs met as they are housed. And so unfortunately in 2022, the 5-year demonstration project for the Foundational Community Supports project is coming to a close. And so if we don't do anything to extend it, we will lose all of the Medicaid funding that is paying for supportive services and permanent supportive housing. And that would be a really bad thing. So the Healthcare Authority is taking the lead on this with an agency request to extend it. And the Housing Alliance is we're supporting their work. And so I would love if any of you are interested in supporting that, love to connect with you all on that. So I want to quickly just talk a little bit about advocacy. So I just mentioned a lot of very specific things that we can all be supporting or engaging with or asking questions about. But what does it look like to actually get that across the finish line and get things passed in the legislature? It takes a lot, and there's a million different ways to get plugged in. So for those of you who are already involved in advocacy work, keep it up, and please stay connected with me and other folks who are pushing for important things in Olympia. But for those of you who are maybe new or like haven't done advocacy a whole lot before, one of the first things I would suggest is getting signed up for our action alerts at the Housing Alliance. I'll put a link in the chat after this presentation so that you all can do that. And you'll get all of our emails that we send out with calls to email Governor Inslee or email your lawmakers or call your lawmakers. So that's one really easy way to get plugged in. You could also testify in the legislative committee if there's a particular bill that you're like, I have experienced this before. I need to like share my own story about this, or I have a person that I'm working with who knows a whole lot about this, or something like that. You might be a perfect person to testify on that bill, meaning you give public comment on that bill in a committee. So love to connect with you about that as well. And then kind of like helping to spread emails and like forward emails and action alerts to folks in your networks is a great way to mobilize and let lawmakers know that folks in your district are really pumped about a certain bill. And we'll have petitions and sign-on letters and things. And then of course, every single year we do Housing and Homelessness Advocacy Day, which is our big lobby day. It's usually in Olympia, and this year it's going to be all virtual. And it's going to actually be a week long instead of just one day. So it'll be February 8th through the 12th. You'll get a big announcement about this, at some point soon when we actually put out the registration for it. But it's going to be a little different this year, being virtual and being a week long. So we'll see how that goes. But that's an opportunity for you to meet directly with your lawmakers in your district and tell them exactly why these bills are important. So this is one really important piece, and that is around storytelling, and which I think a lot of people, I'm often guilty of this, use data and use like very like kind of like, oh, this is a really compelling number here about this thing that relates to this thing. And that can be helpful, but some of the most important data or evidence that lawmakers ever hear is personal stories about the way that a bill would impact a person's life, or the way that the lack of having this bill has impacted their life already. Um, and so, especially with like the tenant protections we're talking about, and talking about folks, needing rental assistance and needing affordable housing, like these, we really need to be working with folks and organizing with folks who have direct stories to share, and centering people who have those direct impacts or direct experiences, and allowing those folks to share their stories directly to lawmakers. So we have actually right now, we have increased staff capacity. This is a very rare thing to say, but we have like more people right now who are able to work directly with folks to craft their story and help share it in different ways. And so I'll put information in the chat on how you can get connected with us around that. And I think I'll skip this because I already know I'm way over time. So I'm going to kind of wrap things up here. But I'll also put a link in the chat around taking action soon, like this week, maybe tomorrow, maybe today. And would love to connect with folks if you have any questions. So thanks. Any questions? Or there may not be time for questions, but.
Thanks so much, John. I just want to draw your attention to the chat because Hadrian is great for always giving us some good anecdotal feedback. So Hadrian has shared their experience with getting a 20-day notice in the past. And then Samya shared information on the city of Bellingham's 60-day notice ordinance. Let's see, looks like Mike Parker has some support for you in here. Cliff is expressing interest in attention to housing application fees, and Council Member Lilliquist has some comment on the MFTE.
Awesome. Yeah, I completely forgot that Bellingham has the 60-day notice extension. Still, I think can often be a burden, and having just cause protections overall, it can be really important. I would guess, even if you have 60 days to move out, if there's an underlying concern around discrimination or retaliation, like getting a 60-day notice, does that still feel good? Yeah, these are great comments. I'm trying to read through them right now. Thank you.
Any other questions for John while we have him here? No? Okay. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda here.
Ms. Payne, before you move on, could I ask a question? Please, sorry, if I couldn't unmute fast enough. John, can you tell us, do you have access to data as far as broken down by county on the number of those who are behind on rent?
So the data that we get is from the Census Bureau's Pulse survey that they've been surveying folks all over the country for basically every 2 weeks since early this summer, and asking questions: are you behind on rent? Are you worried, or how confident are you that you can pay rent next month? And do you feel that you are at risk of eviction in the next 2 months? And they collect that data or compile it at the state level or at the metropolitan statistical area level, which would be like, so I think like the Bellingham greater area would probably be included in that if I'm not mistaken. But they don't have it at the county level. But I can share all the information I have on that with you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
And Cliff, I'll just agree with you about the housing application fees. They just like really, really add up, particularly if you have one of those barriers. Like if you have a criminal history or you have something on your rental application that is not going to be an automatic approval for you, then folks spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars just applying and getting denied over and over. And it's just becomes harder and harder to get into a place. So I completely agree with you. We need to, and that has been something that has been addressed slightly or brought up over the years in the legislature, but we need to spend more time on that.
Thanks, John. I want to say too, for folks who have come in a little late, if you could introduce yourself in the chat and include your email so we can get you on our mailing list, that would be great. Okay, next item on our agenda was resilience. When the steering committee met to set the agenda, we talked about what we might do in a normal year, which would be talk about successes or where we're needing to do more work. And it was agreed that really that's not the right term for this year. It's a bad year. It's a terrible year. Some of us have lost loved ones. We've lost our clients. So really hoping to facilitate a discussion about an example of resilience. And I'm hoping Nancy Livingston can jump in real quick here and talk about how telehealth is working out at Francis Place to give you an idea of an example of resilience. And then we'll do some little small group discussions.
Sure. So I was kind of a doubter when telehealth was brought into Francis Place. We're a permanent supportive housing complex. And I have to tell you, the folks that are using it, it's been very effective. And so we've got a space that's private that folks can go back and meet with their provider. Yeah, it's been successful at Francis Place. So yeah.
Thanks, Nancy.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to try to do something new, and I hope I don't mess it up. Marisa, can you do some breakout rooms, and we can have maybe a 5-minute conversation of what you're seeing in the community as far as resilience in this really terrible year? Marisa, is it working?
It is. I am about to open all the rooms. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself and I didn't want to unmute. I apologize. Okay, so I have everyone broken up into rooms. Everything should just pop up on your screen. It'll be roughly 5 minutes and then it'll kick you out of the room and we'll get back to our discussion. Okay, can everyone hear me? I'm not sure if everybody can hear me, but it looks like we're in a breakout room together. Does anyone have anything that they want to share? Not hearing any responses from anyone.
Sorry, what was that?
Well, this was a breakout room to be able to have a discussion about what we're seeing in the community and everything, but I don't think we actually have anyone present other than you and I.
Maybe, I mean, nobody, I don't really know how to use, I didn't know what we were doing, so.
Yeah.
This is all new to all of us.
Yeah, maybe we just didn't get put into a room.
I think this is new to all of us. I'm sorry, I was on the phone with.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Ladies, I'm
Hi.
here.
hi.
I'm here. I'm just multitasking.
I hear you. I
As
hear
I
you.
was listening to the presentation, I was working on some other things that are on deadline, so my brain's not in the game. But I think from here at Lydia Place, we've seen a lot of resilience. I think we've seen community members come together and step up in some really lovely ways to try and help out. And every time I listen to like Emily from the school district, I hear about these great examples of like wish lists being filled, and at the same time, when I talk to folks who are our clients, what I hear is just a lot of stress and strain and isolation, and
Yeah.
all these triggers of trauma and anxiety and depression, and I think about as a like a relatively healthy person with resources, how much like anxiety I feel, just generalized anxiety, and of course thinking about our clients who are either experiencing homelessness or recently experienced homelessness. It's just it's such a heavy blanket of struggle this year, and the mental health toll is so significant, and then our children have like little context, if any, right? Like all of our nonverbal children and our young kids can't understand. Like my 2-year-old, she's like, oh, because of COVID, but she doesn't know what that actually means, right? She just knows that like this place is closed and that place is closed and they can't come in the house. And so there's just this like really heavy toll that this is all taking, particularly in the area of mental health. And at the same time, we have seen, we've seen people just step up to be compassionate humans and try and, give a little extra and be present a little more and reach out. But I think I've just seen this, when we have such segregated physical communities, that it's extra hard to reach across the road, right, or next door and offer help is needed more than ever. And now more than ever, we feel the strain of what happens in segregation. So I don't know if that's exactly the bright spot of resilience, but we certainly have seen that. I mean, just like one tiny, not so significant example is like at Lydia Place, every year we do adopt a family wish lists for all the kids in the program whose parents want to fill out a Christmas wish list. And we saw those this year. We're like, oh, I don't know how hard of a lift this is going to be, asking the community, to adopt these kids, because it's economic times are hard across the board. We saw those wish lists being adopted faster than any previous year, and it's just like little things like that just you're like, yes, right, like it gives you hope that people are actually stepping up to do more, not backing away to do less. And that's just it's a beautiful thing, because boy, we feel like we're waiting for the bottom to fall out.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah. Hi,
Hi.
Emily. I just wanted to tell you, by the way, I've been watching your the meetings for the homeless, and I'm so impressed with you, and the way that you kind of keep it together and have kept and have actually helped to move things forward. And I just really want to tell you that you're doing a great job on that. And I know what you're talking about. I had a previous neighbor come by my house last night. I had to ask who he was through the door, and he was bringing me stuff that because he was thinking about. He brought me socks, he brought me hand warmers, he brought me foot warmers. And then, as he's done every year, he handed me money, but he handed me more this year, because he says he wants to do stuff, but he doesn't know who or how. And he says, you'll know who needs what and how. So it's sort of my little, and I was like, oh my God. He handed me like $500 just,
isn't that amazing?
So that's the kind of thing that, people are feeling. They want to help. They want to do something, even though they can't reach out. They want, because he's an older person too. It's awesome to see that. Yeah. It really is. Yeah.
The hope. Yeah. Thank goodness for a little hope sprinkled in there. Or
I know. And I just go, he says, you're going to know what to do. I said,
yeah, not a problem.
I just know that it's nice to know that when we need something, it's there.
Exactly. Oh, we're getting
Oh
kicked
my
out.
gosh. Look at all these humans. Where did they all come from?
I don't know.
Oh, and they're disappearing too. Oh, it's everybody.
Okay.
Are we going back to the big group?
Yep, we're back in the big group.
Okay. Usually we get a warning, Terry, like you're going, breakout room is ending in 60 seconds, but
You know, it's weird. It only showed up on mine and I thought it broadcasted to everyone. So I kept looking on my screen and nothing was showing up.
oh, that's funny.
Yes, so we're back.
Great. Hi, Christina.
Is that Kate Robertson I see?
Hi, Kate. Oh, this is so great.
Love you, miss you.
I can't help but want to like, hey, can I talk to you about something while we're sitting here in a Zoom room? I got some business with you. It's hard to resist.
I've always got time for you, Emily.
Thank you, my friend. Hi, Jen.
You're muted, Terry.
I've just been running my mouth on mute. I'm sorry. So I'd love to hear what you've talked about. In my small group, we talked about the resilience of our staff and clients. And Chase had this great example, which I have also seen in talking to folks that are in our system, giving them a call to get their check-in, talking to folks who say, yeah, I'm in a bad spot and it's not great, but other people need help more. Please help them first. And we're hearing that a lot, and that's really remarkable. We'll love to hear what you guys have talked about.
A couple of things our group talked about was, number one, the resilience seen in our housing providers with the onset of COVID in the community and how people just rallied and dug right in. I was just flabbergasted by that. And then another one was base camp and the resilience showing with their moves from First to the Bellingham High School and then also on to their current location. So there were others as well. Those are a couple.
Yeah, we hit a few of those topics too. You know, all the staff that's out there working on these issues, and also just the general community that's been more visible and engaged with some of the public meetings. You know, meetings like this one, we're seeing people who are taking this opportunity to get more involved than they were before, rather than withdrawing. So that's, I think, really commendable too.
That's awesome. Thanks, Chris. If you're more comfortable putting your thoughts in the chat, that's fine. I can always read them out too. Any other discussions?
You got a tough crowd on your hands today,
I
Terry.
know.
Our group, we talked a lot about how the community really supported providers and the homeless, and that there was so much support, and then also the resiliency of our residents here in permanent supportive housing, you know, to adapt to things that that we couldn't do anymore, communal meals or transportation. So yeah, so kudos to our folks.
Thanks, Nancy. Anything else? I used to have this teacher at Western that would just sit there and let everybody get uncomfortable, but I'm not going to do that. If there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and move on and do another thing that's new. I made a poll to see what are your 3 most important topics you'd like to see discussed in the next year. So I'll launch that now, and if you can participate in that, that would be great. Hopefully you can all see it. The first question is most important, second question, second most important, third most important.
Oh. Yeah, that's an awful lot to choose from.
I know it's a long list, Teresa. I'm sorry. I went through the last 8 years of agendas to see what the themes were, and that's where this came from. Give it a few more seconds here. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and show it to you. Can you see it?
Did you get to share your screen for it, Carrie?
Do I need to?
I think you might, because I'm not seeing anything. I'm not sure if anyone
No
else
one
is.
can see it? Okay.
I can see it. It pops up on my other screen though. Might be hiding.
It looks like the most popular first priority is service provider presentations. Second, city and county updates. Third, also city and county updates. Thanks for doing that. I appreciate it. Okay. Any comments, discussion on that for the next year? Suggestions, complaints? Okay. Moving on to our next topic. We have some nominations for new members to the steering committee, so I'd like to announce that to y'all. Pamela Kahn from Pioneer Human Services. She'll be serving as a housing agency that serves adults. Paula, and I don't know how to pronounce Paula's last name, for Northwest Youth Services. Can someone help me out? I'm going to try. Metiza? She will be representing homeless youth. Mike Parker will be filling the seat for housing and healthcare integration, and Lorena Shaw will be representing employment services. We have other openings too, so if you would like to nominate someone, please make sure that they are interested, and then write to me, let me know. We'll talk about that in steering. Any comments on that? Okay. There is something in the chat that I want to share. Cliff talked about the inherent resiliency of anyone who's experienced homelessness. Talked about the amazing support staff at Catholic Community Services and Opportunity Council who have offered each other and their clients. And then Tiana Kelly she wants to share that the mutual aid groups that have been supporting the folks at Camp 210, City Hall Occupation, have shown huge amounts of resiliency in their unpaid and unfunded efforts to support houseless folks in our community. Thanks for that, Tiana. That's hard work, and it is appreciated. Okay. Next item on our agenda would be an update from the city. Samia, could you do that, please?
You bet. Hi, everyone. Samuel Lutz, Housing and Services Program at the City of Bellingham. I just shared a couple of links in the chat that have to do with a couple of the announcements I'm going to make. One is that the city's Planning Commission is meeting tonight at 7 o'clock to talk about potential changes to the family definition. This is something that provides part of the backbone of single-family zoning in the community is how folks define a family. And it's a fairly traditional, outmoded definition that's carried forward in our code for quite some time. And so, but it's a very complicated process to figure out what to do about that. So the council has discussed this. The Planning Commission is currently discussing this. It's going to continue for some time, and the Planning Commission recommendations will go back to the council. There will be public hearing opportunities, but if you're interested in looking at kind of what's been happening, the discussion that's been happening, and or attending some of the meetings to listen in, go to that cob.org/family definition site to get all of that information. Secondly, the city will be releasing some notices of funding availability on Monday. So I also put that website in the chat. Check either end of the day Monday or Tuesday and beyond to look at those that are going to be coming out. This is for all kinds of things, and they're due end of January. Opportunities for funding services, basic human services like food security and whatnot, as well as housing services and capital projects as well, community facilities, housing construction, housing rehab, home ownership, all of those things will be available for applicants to apply for. Lastly, I had the opportunity to meet for the first time today with a couple of the folks involved with the encampment. I think there's probably people on the call today that know a lot more about that. My role was mostly just in talking about how to apply for funding or get involved. There are also folks on the permit side just talking about how to apply for permits to do follow the interim housing temporary encampment process that the city has set out for other sites. So unless there's questions, that's all I have.
Thanks, Samia. Any questions? Okay. How about an update from the county? Chris, do you mind doing that?
Yeah, I'll get it started. I'm going to tag team with Barbara on this one, but I'll first talk a little bit about the point in time count. So a lot of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the point in time count. Some of you probably aren't. It's a once a year survey of people experiencing homelessness. It's done in Whatcom County, as it's every other county pretty much in the country. And we do that every year, and we try to do it the same way every year so that we can look at trends and see how things are shifting. This year, this coming January, is not going to be like last January, it looks like. So we are going to do it a little bit differently. In the past, we've sent folks out with clipboards to food banks and other places where people experiencing homelessness might gather. We're not going to do that this year. We don't feel that it is the safe or responsible thing to send people out to interact with people unless it's absolutely mandatory. So we are not doing that. We will have a survey process done for people that are staying in emergency shelters. We'll do some phone outreach for people that we know are seeking assistance, but we will not be able to do it in the traditional way. So it's a bummer. We'd like to be able to look at that data, learn from it, and use it to help plan our services. But we are hoping that with the amount of data that we get, we'll still have a relatively representative sample. We know there's going to be some limitations, but we will hopefully be able to look at some of the demographic info and see how things are progressing over the course of 2020, which has been a wild ride. So that's our plan for the point in time, 2021. If you've been thinking about volunteering, unfortunately, that's probably not going to be possible unless you're working at one of the agencies that provides emergency shelters. And with that, I'll pass it over to Barbara.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so I wanted to talk with everyone about the county housing budget, which has finally been completed. We were quite far behind this year because it was a really complicated process in setting that housing budget. So just to give some context for those of you that aren't familiar with this process, our housing budget for the county is supported by 11 different funding sources for 23 contracts going into 2021. And each source, each of those 11 sources has specific requirements that have to be met. Some are much more strict than others. For instance, our document recording fees have a great deal of flexibility compared with our new Emergency Solutions COVID grant, which is a HUD administered grant. So this year was especially challenging in setting that budget. First of all, it's always a challenge. We never have even close to the amount of funding that we would like to have to support everyone that is experiencing homelessness in the community. So in addition to that, we also experienced a positive component, and that was the fact that we had an increase of funding from a couple of new funding sources. And one that I've already mentioned was the Emergency Solutions Grant. That is the HUD grant and will be out in contracts. Actually, we have a small amount out in contracts currently that we were able to get out quickly. And then we've got more funding going out in our 2021 housing contracts, and that will be used for additional case management, rental assistance, emergency shelter and motels and facilities. It will also be partially supporting the youth ground floor program, because 10% of this, at least 10% of this grant, which is it's over $3 million in total. And 10% of that has to go for youth and young adult homelessness. So, and we definitely want to support youth and youth homelessness in that regard. So that's not a hardship by any means for us. The grant allowed us to increase our housing budget from about 5.2 million to as much as 7.1 million going into 2021. So that's the 5 million was in 2020. The 7-some million is going into 21. However, we're not absolutely positive we'll be able to maintain all the contracts that we have this funding going out in for beyond the first half of 2021. There's a lot of different circumstances that we have to consider and look at. That's certainly our hope, but as we get further into the year, we'll be issuing a RFP for case management and considering how much funding we have to put out in those contracts as a result of the RFP. And those contracts will start July 1st of 2021. So the second half of our budget for 2021 has some unknowns, but we're still hopeful that we can maintain the increase in case management and rental assistance as the year progresses. Another new funding source is the shelter grant, which came from Commerce, and that is being used to support portions of a new shelter program and resources with Lydia Place and the YWCA. So the county focuses, a little bit of background for, again, for those of you not so familiar with our processes at the county. We focus primarily on contracts for case management, rental assistance, permanent supportive housing, and emergency shelter, and some transitional housing. And all of those programs use a housing first approach. We choose these interventions primarily because they work. They're proven, they're tested, they are evidence-based in practice. And so that's why for a number of years now, going steady, those are the primary ways in which we use county funding. I also want to emphasize that the county is not the sole funder of any of those programs. The City of Bellingham, the Housing Authority, other state and federal funding, private donations are very generous in our community. So it takes many different entities and many different people to make this system work at least partially. We're not fully there, and it would take a lot more in order for us to get there. But, you know, the important thing is that we're trying to take advantage of every opportunity we have and trying to be efficient and effective with our funding so that we can serve as many people and serve them well. Numbers aren't always everything. Sometimes, you know, you have to put a lot into one person. For example, permanent supportive housing may be more costly than some other types of interventions or programs. So that's the county budget going into next year. Any questions or comments?
I have one. I just want to express that I'm just really glad that you're able to support the ground floor. It's functioning as an access point to our coordinated entry system. So that's the main way that youth ages 18 to 24 can apply for services and access not just Northwest Youth Services, but any housing provider that they may be eligible for. So that's a really important part of our system. Thank you.
Good point, Terry. Thanks. Anyone else? Okay.
Okay. I'm just going to share something in the chat here. Mike was asking Samia about those notice of funding availability, whether it's more or less money. Samia says it's about the same for capital projects, a bit more for services, especially if there's a COVID link. And she shared her contact information if anyone needs more on that.
Yeah, please don't hesitate to contact me. I didn't give quite as much context. Barbara, you did a great job of filling in the gaps. I will say that not all of the city funding goes through these NOFAs. The city does fund some ongoing programs that we do not ask to reapply annually or every other year. Things like the homeless outreach team, also the ground floor, and some fundamental programs of the Opportunity Council like the Homeless Service Center, their Family Services Program, and the same at Lydia Place, their Family Services Program. So those are considered ongoing programs that are regularly funded and don't come through that NOFA process. And the same goes for services at some of our facilities like Francis Place, 22 North, and the Sun facilities that serve permanent supportive housing that way. So those do not have to reapply annually. Those are long-term commitments that the city has made.
Thanks, Samia. Anything else? Just want to repeat what I announced at the beginning because so many folks have joined a little late, which is great. I'm very happy that so many people are here today. But on this winter solstice, the Homeless Service Center, specifically the outreach team, and I think Teresa spearheaded this back in 2013, if I read my notes right, Teresa, that
2015, I think. It was
2015.
the first year that we did the outreach team.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I found notes from meetings when you were advocating for this to happen. So you had some temerity and you stuck with it and it happened. We generally recognize this on the solstice. This year it happens on December 21st, and it's going to be a virtual ceremony to remember the people we've lost who've experienced homelessness. If you'd like to be invited or be included in that, please be sure and put your email in the chat so that we can make sure that you have the link to participate. Katie Stevens has a question. What are the latest updates on winter shelters? I can say what I've heard, and that is that Christ the King was willing to staff additional overflow shelter at the drop-in center location. Can anybody confirm that?
Yeah, I don't see anyone from the Lighthouse Mission on this call, but yes, the old base camp location will be used starting to, well, now for overflow capacity when needed. So when the Lighthouse Mission base camp at the Cornwall location is approaching capacity, they will open in that location. I think the capacity the occupancy last night was 146 guests at the mission, and I believe they can hold up to 190 or so guests. So they are not at or near capacity right now, but the old location will be used for an additional 50 folks when it's needed. The capacity is not when the capacity has been reached at the other location.
If I may, there's a bit of a complication with that in that the base camp is now limiting their guests based on COVID-related concerns. And so they maybe can't reach capacity, right? And so you've got this artificial situation where there may be some unmet need. And if we measure need only by whether base camp is full, we're not going to open an overflow when maybe there's a need for an overflow. That's between the Lighthouse and the county who's defining. Well, actually, no, I think it's the Lighthouse and Christ the King are defining overflow themselves. Anyway, I'm concerned that we may not have officially capacity at base camp and yet really might still need overflow.
I share that concern. Thank you. Katie had a follow-up question. Is there going to be any severe weather shelter options this year? And I think that usually the county heads up that effort. I don't know that Ann Beck is with us today.
Yeah, she is not, but she worked real hard to find volunteer organizations, partners that would host. She wasn't able to come up with anyone. There's a lot of concerns around COVID, obviously. So there's not another agency lined up for that at this time. There is, as has been mentioned, the expansion at the old drop-in center. There are new beds that are on the way to the base camp right now that allow them to reorganize a little bit to increase capacity further. And then there's some money for hotel stays if necessary as well.
So we've got a gap there for sure. I think Sanya has one more thing to add to the city update.
Sorry, I just wanted to point out that we do have a safe encampment RFQ out right now for agencies that are interested in responding to that. It's due tomorrow, or sorry, not tomorrow, December 4th. Yeah, that is tomorrow. And that's on the same page as that funding opportunity link that I had sent out already. It's the first open opportunity listed on that page. So you just have to click the plus box and you can see the RFQ.
Thanks, Samia. Mike is hoping that Road to Home could give us an update on any activities there. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Mike. We don't have too much of an update right now. We are going to apply for the RFQ with the Low Income Housing Institute. We would definitely like to get a community up as soon as possible. But there are time constraints and personnel constraints. We're having a pandemic. A couple of the folks on our board are healthcare providers, and then we have vulnerable people. So getting volunteers obviously is tough. So that's kind of what we're up to. In the meantime, we are still following a couple clients in our pilot program for the Community Ally program, where we just kind of connect volunteers to individual folks experiencing homelessness that can just help kind of support the case managers in their care plans for these patients, I'm a nurse, for these clients. And then also really support them and get them connected to the community, get them connected to services they're not connected to, run and get that piece of paper, put it in the mailbox, those little simple steps that can really help a case manager. So we're working on that, and we are offering some community training sponsored by the Whatcom Community Foundation, going over some trauma-based care, ACEs, kind of social justice things to consider when you're volunteering, so that volunteers are more prepared when they come to your organizations to volunteer. They have some of those skills already. And to sign up for that, you just go to our website, www.roadtohome.org. There's an event page. You can click right in there. It's Saturday, December 12th, from 10 to 12:30. So we've got a lot going on. Sorry to be late.
Well, that's great. Thanks, Melissa.
I just want to say I'm very impressed, Melissa. I went on your website. If people haven't been on the website to Road to Home, was very impressed reading about your board of directors, with your pilot program, with your plans, and I love your approach and your presentation and your professionalism. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. That means a lot.
Any other topics you want to discuss or announcements before we finish up?
I just wanted to give a quick update on the HEN program with the Opportunity Council. The Housing and Essential Needs program, or more so just kind of get the word out that we have the capacity to take on a lot of new clients right now, and we need more clients for our rental assistance program. So I just want to make sure you all are aware of that, can be pointing people in our direction if they're not already connected with us. And so we take the referrals from DSHS, whoever they have determined is HEN eligible based on their disability. And if you want more information on how to get people in that program, we have a specific HEN line at Opportunity Council that you can call and leave messages. I couldn't put it in the chat. It's just our main phone number, and the HEN line is extension 285, and it's a voicemail system. So someone that works in the program will give you a call back for any just general questions, or if you have any clients in mind, we can talk through that specific client situation to see if we can help them get connected.
Megan, is it okay if I give a little context for HEN? Yeah. And stop me if I make a mistake. So HEN is, it's assistance for folks who have a disability that is generally thought to be resolved in the short term. So within a year or less, and they're expected to go back to work. If you're HEN eligible, folks can get rental subsidy and also some essential needs, hygiene items and that kind of thing. Also, people who are on ABD, aged, blind, and disabled income from the state can be eligible for HEN too, but it's not a permanent subsidy. Did I get that right, Megan? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So DSHS determines who's eligible, sends them a letter, and the letter says, go to Opportunity Council and get connected there. Are you still taking clients from coordinated entry, or are you able to serve more than that right now, Megan?
Yeah, so there's two routes of getting into the program. So when the client's homeless, they'll go through the coordinated entry system. We're also taking on a lot of clients through eviction prevention. So if someone's already renting and they've fallen behind on their rent and they're HEN eligible through DSHS, we can enroll them and help them get caught up on their rent and then help them with rent ongoing. So there's 2 different routes for getting into the program.
So if you're working with someone who wants HEN services, it's good to make sure that they're in the system. If they don't know, with the release of information in place, you can call the Homeless Service Center and we can confirm that for anyone you're working with. Any other topics, comments? Okay, well, thanks everybody for being here today. I appreciate it. We'll see you in February.
Thank you, Terry.
Bye.